Hey guys, Savage Joy here with Real Progressives. Tonight I am joined by Matthew Miller. He is running for Michigan State Senate, District 18. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Matthew.
Thanks, Joy. It's great to be here.
It's awesome to have you. You reached out to me, I guess it was a few weeks ago, and I'm glad to have you on. You're getting a bit of steam with your campaign. It's getting known. You have a really, really interesting background of how you grew up, and you're extremely open about it. Do you want to give people kind of the gist of your story, lack of a better term?
So the reason why I'm so open with it is my entire life from the age of 5 to 17 is public record. Anyone can go to the county I was living in, pull the court records, and see every event that happened in my life. So there's no reason to hide anything. When I was 5 years old, I was put in foster care. Removed my biological family, I was placed in a foster home that later adopted me. About 5 years after I was adopted, I was removed for abuse and neglect. From there, my brother and I, we bounced homes for the next, 7 years or so, 5 years, something like that. We bounced for a long time. And then, I graduated high school at 17. I was emancipated from the court just a little bit before my 18th birthday, and I went to college. I was going to Olivet, just south of Lansing, Michigan. Took a helmet to the knee and tore my ACL. I was playing football there, and it just kind of ended that really quick. So at 18 years old, I got curious. I never really knew who my parents were. I didn't even know where they were living. So I started reaching out to them. And it must have been less than a week later, my father heard that I was searching for him, contacted me. So we started talking, and about 4 months later, I went out to visit him. From there, my brother and I, we moved out to North Dakota, which is where they were living. And I was out there for about a year and a half. And as you noticed in my story that I wrote, it was the first time in my life that I ever actually got to see racism firsthand, like legitimate, unbridled racism. It was terrifying. I had never seen anything like it. I mean, growing up in foster homes, I grew up with people of all different races, all different creeds, and all different backgrounds. And it was just terrifying to see this. I was a supervisor, my first time ever in a supervisor position. And my employee who was being treated like this, after, the guy was talked off and pushed away, I asked him, I said, DJ, are you all right? And he's an older guy in his 50s at the time. And he's like, Matt, don't worry about it. He said, I deal with this every day. I couldn't understand his cavalier attitude. It was the strangest thing to me. And that, at 19 years old, that's when it really started to spark me that I had to do something. But what am I to do at 19? So I started talking. I started getting involved in Facebook groups and thinking I was really making an impact. But I didn't think really that it was doing much. So when I got back to Michigan, I got back in February of 2016, I really started, kind of focusing on myself. I started focusing on, getting back to college. I started focusing on advancing my career. I am working at Walmart, and I just realized that I'm just not happy with it. I'm studying business management. I had all intentions to climb the corporate ladder. And I asked myself one day, I said, who is this helping? I said, it's helping me. And that's it. I said, there's 7 billion people on this planet, and I'm helping one. And so I said I had enough of it. I changed my major. I'm now studying journalism and communications. This past fall, I went and I sat down with a few candidates. And the general consensus I got from them was, when I asked them about running for office, the general consensus was, don't. Finish your education, take a few years, and do it. But the way I look at things is that I don't have time to just sit back and wait. For example, and this can be a little dark, 2 of my best friends passed away last December. They were killed in a trucking accident in Texas. They had just got engaged to get married, just put a down payment on a house, and we're dead. So when I look at it, I don't have time to sit back and wait. None of us have time to sit back and wait for things. We have to progress. We have to move forward as quickly as we can.
Absolutely. It's definitely a wake-up call when something like that happens. Now, do you want, just before I get the questions, I know I'm going to get it. Can you just give us your age before we even get there?
I'm 22. I turned 23 this September.
Okay. So I understand when people say finish college and everything, but you definitely have that desire to start now. And I mean, let's be honest, the progressive wave is coming. I don't know that a few years down it would be as good of a time for people who are progressive to run. Hopefully it will be. Right now with Trump and everything, I think people are getting a lot more exposure and hopefully a lot more votes. So speaking of your brother, how does he feel about you running? Is he supportive?
He was a little skeptical at first, of course. I mean, we all were. He wanted me to make sure I was taking care of myself. I'm working, I'm going to school full time, and now I'm running a campaign. So he wanted me to make sure that I was taking care of me. And he's been helping me find ways to de-stress, to manage all three parts of my life without burning myself out. He's been entirely supportive this whole time.
That's amazing. What was it that actually, I know you kind of became passionate about things, but what was the final inspiration to decide to actually get into politics?
So I have a friend. She's a state representative in New Hampshire. She's a bit of a firebrand. Her name's Sherry Frost. I was talking with her one day, and I said, Sherry, I want to do something. I said, but I'm not qualified, not yet. And she said, why not? And, and I might be paraphrasing just a little bit, but I said, I'm 22, I'm in college, there's no way I'm qualified. She said, let me ask you a few questions. Sure, go for it. She said, do you believe that women should have the right to make decisions about their bodies? Well, absolutely, of course. She said, okay, do you believe it's a bad idea to poison the earth, air, and water? Well, yeah, I mean, someday I may have kids, and they may have kids, and there needs to be something left for them. She said, okay. She said, do you believe that all people deserve a baseline level of human dignity and respect? Yeah, absolutely. We the people means all the people. She said, okay, one last question. Do you believe that the rich should be taxed and the poor should be assisted? Well, of course. She said, right there, you are more qualified than most people at every level of office. And it really took me back because I was thinking about it, and it was shocking to me that these four fundamental ideas to some people are just so strange.
Absolutely. And I think, that's something that a lot of us learned in 2016. A lot of us just simply won't vote for a 1%er anymore. People who have struggled, like yourself, people who know what it's like to work paycheck to paycheck, people who have been through these things are more trustworthy. We can trust that you guys are going to do what you say you're going to because you have no ulterior motives. And you're not taking any corporate donations, correct?
Absolutely not. There's no need for it.
Agreed. Is that something you're passionate about? Like, would it impede you from voting for someone else?
I don't like to think that I'm a one-issue voter. If someone is completely progressive, with the exception that they take donations from corporate-based PACs, I would have to really look at it. I mean, it depends, if they're saying, hey, I'm going to push a single-payer healthcare message, then I'm taking donations from, let's say, Blue Cross Blue Shield or other insurance agencies. I would be skeptical. How honest are you really being if you're taking money from these foundations while at the same time pushing a message that is the opposite? So right. It would depend on the context of the situation.
Right. I think that's totally valid. I like kind of digressing a little bit back to your age again, but I like how the top of your page actually says progressive millennial. I like that because you're embracing it. You're saying, look, I know I look young. I know I'm a college student, but we keep hearing about these millennials and how active they are and things like that. So I like that you're embracing it. I think it's advantageous, especially you said that you do live in a college town.
Yeah.
That's going to help you as well.
Every slur that's been thrown at me or my campaign, every, put down remark, we've embraced it. We've worn it as a badge of honor. I was told I was being disruptive and disorderly. So we embraced it. We're told that.
How so?
I met with, I'm not going to name drop, but I met with someone a few weeks back, and I was informed that I need to follow a cookie cutter approach, or else I might make enemies and not be able to ever run for office in this area again. But the thing is that we keep trying the same thing every 2 years. We keep voting for the same people. They keep pushing the same message, and we see no difference while they stand up there on stage and say, hey, let's bring change. But they push the same ideas. And so,
absolutely. In the primaries, who did you support?
I was all for Bernie. And I mean, I'll be honest with you, I was bitter after the primary. But when Bernie Sanders said, let's come together, and I saw Trump for who he really was, it was either let's take the same people, let's maintain the status quo for another 4 years, with Hillary. So that way in 2020, we have another opportunity to push the platform a little bit further left. But instead, we went the opposite direction. I mean, so much has changed in the last year under Trump's control that it's hard to recognize our country anymore.
Do you think that Hillary really is status quo? You don't think like she's way, way more evil
than
the typical status quo?
Her platform was so similar to President Obama's that it would have been like having Obama for another 4 years, except for now you have a woman instead of a man. And I think that would have done wonders for the feminist movement in attempts to empower more women to run for office.
Do you think that she set a good precedent as the first woman with all her scandals and everything like that, that would be like a good example as the first woman?
Well, I think the issue comes from is most of the people in her generation of the Democratic Party, how do I phrase this? They're in love with those that can fund their campaigns. And so, no. I mean, in all reality, no, it wouldn't have been, a great example, but at the same time, it would have been much, much better than what we got.
I wrote in Bernie because he's the only one who earned my vote. And I know a lot of people went third party, things like that, because they couldn't bear to vote establishment. So I totally understand that. Both of them are the two most unpopular candidates ever.
Sure.
So I think we were kind of fucked regardless, which really sucks because you're like, how should I commit suicide, essentially? Like, which way should I do it? So this whole thing was kind of a learning experience in so many respects. How do you deal with the constant vote shaming that is still rampant, especially on Facebook? Just still, after over a year. If you didn't vote this way, you wouldn't have Trump and all this. Like, how do you deal with that?
Our team has been trying to develop a message that's fluid. That way we can reach everyone and explain to them that regardless of what you've done in your past, there's still a future for you. There's still a way to move forward with this. And so if someone decided, hey, I'm going to vote Stein no matter what, and they did, okay, that's your past. That's your decision. That's not who you are anymore. And we have the opportunity to help develop our electorate to start getting more responsible and people dedicated representatives in office.
So now your primary is open, correct?
Yes.
And you also have same day voter registration,
mm-hmm.
which is basically, as someone from Pennsylvania, a dream. I would love all states to have that. And that's only going to help you and anyone else who runs in your state. What would you like to see happen in the future as far as voting? Like, do you want open primaries? Do you want paper ballots? What do you look forward to in the future?
More polling places, definitely. The ability for our workers, our blue-collar workers, to be able to get away from their jobs and vote without repercussions at work. I think that's huge. Because I know a lot of people won't vote because their jobs will hold them accountable. Paper ballots are definitely a great idea, but we need to find a way to do it in a timely manner that doesn't hinder our electorate process. I think better access to absentee ballots and more of a guarantee that everyone's vote is going to matter. And that spans greater than just voting day. You know, we look at processes that are being pushed through Michigan. One in particular is the change in the recall process, where in the past it used to be a performance issue. Do you believe that, you know, Representative X is doing a good job, yes or no? Essentially. I mean, that's not what it would say, but essentially. Whereas now it's become a partisan issue. Would you rather have Democrat Representative X or Republican Representative Y? And so instead of voting on whether or not they think that this individual has done a good job, they vote on party lines. And it does nothing but, you know, keep the division in our state and our country. Going back to your question about voting, I think paper ballots is a great idea and a way to go. We just need to find a way that we can do it efficiently and effectively.
Right. I've heard suggestions as far as having paper ballots while being videotaped and having them counted while they're being submitted, and then double counted, and then so on and so on. So it shouldn't take as long as one would think. And also, especially like you said, more polling places. That was something we saw in 2016, where literally hundreds of voting places were just shut down for the primaries. Conveniently in burning heavy states, but that has seemed to happen continuously. So I think that's a good idea about having more polling places. Also, I interview a lot of candidates from other states who actually have caucuses, and people have to be prepared to be there for a few hours. They can't just leave work. So I definitely like the idea of having off on voting day, period. You get the day off no matter, that way there's nothing impeding you from voting, which is all right. Now, in Michigan, have you ever gone to Flint, or how far are you from Flint?
About an hour and a half south.
Have you ever been there?
We went through there. I went through there personally. Must have been about a year ago. Just on my own, driving through the area and seeing what was going on. Wasn't enough to really get involved or really have a chance to speak with anyone. But it was able to give me kind of a broad overview on what is happening. Of course, I didn't get a chance to see the details of everything. But it felt like something that you would see in a movie. It didn't feel real.
Yeah, my friend who's doing an event, which I'm speaking at tomorrow, she's the one who started and ran Camp Promise at Flint. She's in Pennsylvania by me, and she literally picked up and went to Flint to help those people for probably over a year now. She's a hero. But yeah, we're talking over 3 years this has been going on. No. Do you plan to go there and to, do anything to reach out to the people and kind of work in your activism with that?
So this April, my campaign manager and I have talked a little bit about organizing a team of people here to move to Flint for a few days and see in what ways we can volunteer, what ways we can help support their community. We're going to start reaching out to activists and politicians and candidates in the area to see what we can do to help them. You know, it may not even really be anything on the ground. It may be donations, it may be, you know, money, but we'll see.
Yeah, and I can always give you the name of my friend who runs the thing there, and I'm sure she has tons of info. I actually just had an RP member, Mark. He wants to know what your thought process is on ranked choice voting.
I apologize, I'm not too familiar with that.
Essentially, it's you know how, like, okay, let's say you're running as a Dem and there's 3 other people who are Dems running against you. You would literally get to put them in order. So they would say, okay, Matthew Miller is 1, so and so is 2, and the winner would be chosen as per the ranks. They use it in other countries.
That's an interesting idea. I guess it gives more flexibility to the vote. I want to see how it works to these other countries and see how they implement it before I give an official yes or no.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. You were telling me that February 24th, you're having a forum with 3 other candidates. Can you just kind of give us a brief description of the other people you're running against and what makes you stand out from them?
Sure. So on the 24th, the Progressive Caucus of the Michigan Democratic Party is hosting a forum in Washtenaw County with myself and the 3 other Democratic candidates who have announced their run for the seat. The candidates are, there's a former House rep. His name is Jeff Irwin. He served 2 terms, I believe. He's termed out of that seat, so he's looking to get into the Senate. Man's worked in Ann Arbor for years, and he's looking to spread his influence more across Washtenaw County. There's Miss Michelle Dietrich. She was a Bernie staffer here in Michigan. She helped organize his campaign, and you know, there's a potential that her influence in the campaign helped Bernie win Michigan. In addition, there's Miss Anuja Rajenda. She's a CEO of BaliFit. She's a very strong feminist who has worked in this area for many years. So it's 3 very strong, very respectable individuals. I've met 2 of them personally. I'm excited to meet Ms. Rajenda on the 24th. It's what I see in them is I see a lot of experience and a lot of time with politics. But I fail to see, and maybe this is just from my lack of experience of being around them, maybe I just haven't watched them enough, but I don't really see a lot of burning passion in any of them. And I don't fault them for that. I mean, maybe it's the years and experience that they're able to get their message across without having to be firebrands. But when I see a politician who is excited, who is bright-eyed, and isn't afraid to raise their voice to get their message across, that excites me. It wants me to get more involved. And that's just the type of politics that I see, that I, attach to. So it's of no fault of theirs. It's just personality differences.
Right. I totally understand that. We saw that in 2016. Bernie got, millions of people across the country. Hillary couldn't fill a small gymnasium. I mean, people need to be excited. So absolutely. What is the most important cause to you on your platform? What are you most excited to get in and change?
Drug abuse and mental health reform. It really ties in. I mean, when my campaign manager and I were sitting down, we were drawing out the platform, like physically drawing it out. It looks like a spider web. We were looking at, how can we bring in new forms of tax revenue to the state? We start saying, well, we can start cutting costs in prisons by rehabilitating and releasing drug offenders, moving those who are in, there for mental health issues to hospitals where they can get the treatment they deserve. We look at, how can we help fund schools more? Well, by legalizing and taxing marijuana. Well, and it all ties together. Then, we release the nonviolent, non-assaultive marijuana offenders and the drug offenders. We rehabilitate and get them back to the streets. We're no longer spending the cost to house them, which is about $48,000, $49,000 a year. And they're also contributing into the tax pool, lowering the tax burden across to everyone. And then we can use that money. We can put it into schools. We can help break the school to prison pipeline here in Michigan. And it all ties back into itself. We're looking at something that's greater than just the next 2 years, the next 4 years. We're looking to build a garden, we're looking to plant seeds for a tree that we'll never see. So drug abuse is huge for us. As a matter of fact, with my campaign, I am all about giving a voice to the voiceless. And the political have-nots in general in our country are, the poor, felons, drug abusers, certain minority groups. So former drug abusers or current drug abusers, they get battered by the system. They're down and they get kicked again. I have a gentleman on my campaign who's a former heroin addict. He holds a very high position in my campaign because this isn't because of his past. He's also very, very experienced when it comes to canvassing, when it comes to fundraising. But what better way to say, this is what I want our future to be, than to actively step up and do it?
Absolutely. I can't fathom how hard it is for them to get back out into society and not have people give them opportunity. We see in other states how much the revenue from marijuana has, what it has done for the state. You see, Mark said that he's on your friends list.
Oh, I'll have to look into that.
Mark's hilarious.
So Colorado, since 2014, has raised around $500 million in tax revenue, which is incredible. We have twice the population of Colorado here in Michigan. We would be the first state, because it's going to be on the ballot this fall, to legalize it recreationally. We will be the first state in the Midwest to have legalized recreational marijuana. More than just the 9.9 million people that live here in Michigan, more than just that, we'd be able to get people from Wisconsin, from Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, New York, Pennsylvania, all over the Midwest into here to help boost our economy on this new form of tax revenue.
Yeah, that is a good point as well. Is for-profit prisons something very prevalent in your district?
Not so much here, but there's 31 prisons in the state, and roughly half of them are either for-profit prisons or have for-profit entities working in them. I know Michigan has just passed legislation to forbid for-profit food industries from working in our prisons due to the presence of maggots and bugs in the food.
Wow. Yeah.
And that's what happens when you try to mix, social liberties with profit. The people lose. They lose every time. It's when you take, liberty and you privatize it, you get corporate profits. They try to find ways to cut corners to, increase their profit margins. We take education, the pursuit of happiness, and we privatize it. We take, with charter schools and such, we take, life, healthcare, and we privatize it. But these could all these social liberties, we could turn them into social programs to help everyone, help those who are for them and those who oppose them. Because at the end of the day, universal healthcare is going to reduce medical costs and medical debt all across the state, all across the country. Having public prisons that are funded by the people, treating prisoners, treating the people, the inmates, as people instead of as animals, will lower recidivation rates, will help us rehabilitate criminals and get them back, because the majority of our criminals who are locked up, majority of prisoners who are locked up will be on the streets again. And so instead of setting them up to fail, we can set them up to succeed. We can develop programs to prevent crime from ever happening. We can follow courses like what Sweden has. They have almost completely eradicated their heroin epidemic by giving heroin addicts heroin. It's a fantastic idea. They do it in a controlled environment. They're able to wean them off. They're able to rehabilitate them and get them back out into general society. They save so many lives. We have fentanyl overdoses in Washtenaw County every day. We have heroin overdoses daily here. And these are all solvable problems. And instead of trying to find ways to fix them, we argue about petty non-issues.
Yeah, I totally agree. So your stance is universal health care or Medicare for all?
Absolutely.
And what are you familiar with the term MMT?
No.
It's modern monetary theory. Basically, it's what's that?
Go ahead.
Oh, it's basically it's more of a science than a theory, but essentially, federal taxes don't fund spending. So when the government is saying this is adding to the debt, that's not accurate. We don't have to choose what we give to we the people. It's not, if you guys want healthcare, we're going to cut this. That's not how it works. They have the means and the ability to give us every single thing that other countries have. They just simply choose not to. So it's not something you're going to be dealing with a lot just because you're on state level. But we always like to, plant that seed in our guests just because first, if you move up, it's good to know, but also just to spread the word with people, you work with and interact with. We can send you like a few short articles and a video that we always send. That just, it gives a really concise breakdown. But yeah, it's definitely something to look into because economics is, basically going to, it basically is going to make or break platforms. So we kind of have to know where the money's coming from and what our limits are, so to speak. You also mentioned school. How do you feel about free college tuition?
So that's something I met with an independent gubernatorial candidate, Todd Schleicher, here in Michigan. And he and I had a pretty extensive conversation regarding this. I am all for finding the means necessary, or finding the way to provide all of our students with tuition-free colleges. He proposed another idea to me that I hadn't thought about, and it's providing heavy discounts to where we're not, completely putting it on the backs of the state. In that way, the discount would be reliant on the student who is in college. So the harder they work, the better the GPA, the greater the discount. The more they struggle, the lower the discount. Now, I don't really like the idea of putting more monetary stress on a struggling student. I feel like that's counterproductive. But I understand where he's coming from on that. Personally, I feel like that we should start at least at the community college level. Free 2-year community college. It's the cheapest education that a student can get. Have to meet a 2.0 GPA, have to meet satisfactory academic progress. Keep that up. No tuition for community college. Once we see how well that works, we can start to expand that to include all public 4-year universities. Yeah,
I agree. That's definitely something that's going to need to happen. What about the people who already have existing loans where I worked at the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for years doing student loans, and our rate was, I believe, 8.1%.
Wow.
And I was dealing with medical students with over 200,000 in loans that were accruing interest like just astronomically. What, as far as people who have loans which are already existing, are you open to discussing how to stop having interest on them or something like that?
So we have seen in other countries that forgive student loan debt, they have seen boost to their economies, because that means that these students, these fresh out of college students, or even the ones 10, 15 years down the road, they have more disposable income. And the way the economy works is that greater demand moves the economy. You know, jobs don't come from having more money at the top level. It comes from people who want things. So by reducing the crippling debt of college loans on students or former students, it opens the door for them to help stimulate the economy more.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. What is something else on your platform that you're really passionate about?
So in Michigan, you know, especially due to the Great Lakes and just due to, you know, the beauty of our state, all of us are very passionate about the environment. I have been speaking with my campaign manager who pitched an idea before about reducing Michigan's 83 landfills to 5 megadumps across the state, which would help increase the amount of state regulatory visits and would also bar out-of-state trash and out-of-country trash from coming here. That would help us clean up our cities, clean up our rivers, and clean up our lakes even more. We've looked into nuclear energy a bit. A lot of people are very wary about it, understandably. There hasn't been a new nuclear plant built in the United States since the 1970s. Technology has come a very long way. Now, I'm not a nuclear engineer, I'm not a nuclear physicist. I can't speak about the technologies too much. I just know that we have made major advancements. Wind and solar are huge all across the country. And despite this 30% tariff that the president has issued on imported solar panels by declaring that there is a war on coal. I'm sorry, coal is a dying industry. It's going to go, and we need something ready to replace it. My campaign manager and I have talked, and he pitched an idea about a solar farm and a wind farm out of sight offshore in Lake Michigan. You know, we have more governorship over that lake, and it would be out of sight, beyond fishing range, and there's enough wind and enough sunlight with fewer impediments that we could create enough energy to start chopping out fossil fuels across the state. And we start leading the example for the entire country.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that I think is going to happen inevitably anyway. So they need to just like deal with it like sooner than later. As far as our amazing audience watching, what is something you want to take away from this interview? What is the main thing you want them to think about when your name is said?
So we're not the cookie cutter. We're not the same people. For many of us, this is our first time getting involved in politics. We don't have the same connections as everyone else does. And frankly, we're grateful for that, because that means we're not beholden to the same interests. In addition to that, we know what it's like, personally speaking, we know what it's like to have our voices silenced. And so we're reaching out to everyone, independents, conservative voters, liberals, progressives. You want to put a label on something, we're reaching out to them. We want everyone's voice to be heard. You know, we talk about gerrymandered districts. In the Ann Arbor region, if you're a conservative, your voice is not heard. You know, we're reaching out to anyone who feels like that they're fed up with being silenced. That's what we're here for. When we get into the Senate, we are going to start pushing legislation that brings the voice back to the people, that starts empowering our real fourth branch of the government, the people, and starts telling the legislators, you are accountable to your constituents, not the other way around. We are a true people's campaign. None of us, and I've gotten a lot of flack for saying this, none of us have tens of thousands of dollars to put into our campaign. When other candidates can, Bernie Sanders put, $300,000 to his own campaign? When other candidates can, good on them. I'm proud of you to be able to make the decisions in your life where you have that sort of disposable income. But I feel that on the whole, with the hundreds of thousands of people who hold offices across the nation, on the whole, those who have such massive amounts of disposable income, I wonder and I'm wary on how in touch with the people they can really be. Maybe they've struggled in their life. Maybe they've worked their way up from the ground, and that's fine. But we are not the type who can just turn off our people. We're in the trenches with you.
Do you want to give your Facebook and Twitter and website?
So the website is MatthewMillerSenate.com. Our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, it's all the same. It's at Miller, 4, MI Senate. I'd like to give a shout out to my creative director, Eric Brotherton. He has really pulled our social media a very, very long way to start really becoming a more professional and sound group. In reality, this whole campaign wouldn't be able to be done without my campaign manager, Tim Cousineau. Really an incredible, experienced gentleman who has made leaps and bounds for this campaign. And beyond that, my own family, working with independent Senate candidate Marcia Squire, all these people who have come out to support this political nobody. And really, even if I don't win, we're going to be able to start pushing the platform to the left. I'm not going anywhere.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We definitely wish you the best of luck. It looks like your primary is on August 7th?
Yes.
Okay, good. So you have 6 months to continue canvassing and phone banking and all that fun stuff.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much. Thank you guys for watching. Tomorrow I will be speaking at an event for Native Americans and the pipeline in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And as always, I have shows every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 9 p.m. Eastern. Again, thanks so much for watching and thanks so much for joining us, Matthew.
Thank you, Joy. I appreciate it.
Sure.